The morning sun had barely risen over the small coastal town when Clara stepped out of her modest apartment, clutching a steaming cup of coffee and her tote bag full of work files. Her routine was the same every day: walk briskly to the bus stop, catch the 7:15, and reach the office before anyone else. She liked the quiet before the day began, the calm before the phone started ringing and the world demanded her attention. But lately, that calm had been harder to find. Life had been heavy: her mother's illness, the growing pile of bills, and the sense that her dreams had slowly withered under the weight of responsibility. Clara smiled less now. She barely noticed the things around her that once brought her joy: the sound of the sea, the morning air, the laughter of schoolchildren. Her world had turned gray. At the bus stop, she noticed a man sitting on the bench, hunched over, his head bowed low. His coat was torn, his shoes looked worn to the sole, and his hands trembled slightly as he held a small paper cup. Clara had seen him before, always sitting at the same spot, always silent. The townspeople called him Old Ben, though no one really knew much about him. That morning, something about the man caught Clara's attention more than usual. Perhaps it was the way he was staring at the ground, his eyes hollow, or maybe the way the cold wind whipped through his thin jacket. For a brief moment, she hesitated, caught between her schedule and her heart. Then she sighed, reached into her bag, and pulled out a croissant she had bought the night before. "Would you like this?" she asked softly, extending her hand. The man looked up slowly. His eyes, pale blue and weary, met hers. For a moment, he didn't speak. Then he gave a small nod, his cracked lips parting into the faintest smile. "Thank you, miss," he murmured, his voice gravelly. Clara smiled back, though faintly. "You're welcome." She turned to catch her bus, but as it pulled up, she felt an odd tug in her chest. Something told her to stay a moment longer. She looked back and saw the man carefully breaking the croissant into 2 pieces, setting one half aside. For later, he whispered to himself, not realizing Clara could still hear. The bus driver honked impatiently, and Clara hurried aboard, yet her thoughts stayed with the man long after she reached work. Throughout the day, between meetings and phone calls, his face would drift back into her mind, those tired eyes, that grateful smile. Over the next few days, Clara began to notice more. Old Ben was always there, rain or shine, with his little cup and his faraway stare. Sometimes he hummed softly to himself, other times he just watched people pass as if trying to remember what it felt like to belong. One morning, Clara decided to bring him breakfast again, a sandwich and a thermos of tea. When she handed it to him, his eyes widened in surprise. "You didn't have to," he said, his voice shaky but warm. "I know," she replied. "But I wanted to." He accepted it with trembling hands. "You're very kind." "Not many stop anymore." "Anymore?" Clara asked, curious. Ben nodded, looking toward the street. "Used to be different, you know. Used to work down at the docks. Had friends, a family, a place to go. Then the accident happened, lost my leg, lost my job. After that, I just sort of," he waved his hand vaguely in the air, "faded away." Clara's heart ached. She wanted to say something comforting, something meaningful, but all she managed was, "I'm sorry." Ben smiled sadly. "Don't be. Life gives and takes. You just try to keep breathing in between." She stayed with him a few minutes longer that morning, listening to his soft stories about the sea, his late wife who loved to dance, and the little boy he hadn't seen in decades. When she finally left, something inside her felt lighter, as if, by sharing his sorrow, her own had lessened a little too. Days turned into weeks, and their morning exchanges became routine. Clara would bring him breakfast, sometimes a sandwich, sometimes soup, and he would tell her stories, always ending with a piece of advice wrapped in quiet wisdom. "Don't forget to smile," he'd say. "You never know who might need it." And slowly, Clara found herself smiling again. One morning, after an especially rough night at the hospital with her mother, Clara arrived late to the bus stop. The bench was empty. No Old Ben. The air felt colder, the street somehow quieter. She waited, but he didn't come. The next day was the same. And the next. Worry settled in her chest. On the 4th day, she asked around. The newspaper vendor shrugged. "Haven't seen him in a few days. Maybe he moved on." But Clara couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She went to the shelter downtown, asking if anyone knew him. A volunteer there recognized the description. "Yes, that's Ben," she said softly. "He was brought in last week. He's at the community hospital, had a bad fall." Clara didn't even think twice. She took a cab straight there. When she found him, he was lying in a small, clean room, hooked up to an 4. His eyes fluttered open as she entered. "Clara," he whispered, his voice frail but warm. "Didn't expect to see you here." "Of course you'd see me," she said, sitting beside him. "You scared me, disappearing like that." He chuckled weakly. "Didn't mean to. Just took a tumble near the pier. Guess my body's not as steady as it used to be." She stayed for hours, talking with him, listening to his old sea tales. When she finally left, she promised she'd visit again soon. And she did, every few days, after work, bringing soup, magazines, and a little company. But time has a way of moving faster when we wish it wouldn't. One rainy evening, when Clara walked into his room, the bed was empty. A nurse nearby noticed her frozen expression and gently said, "I'm sorry. He passed peacefully this morning." For a moment, Clara couldn't breathe. The world seemed to tilt slightly. She walked to the window, staring out at the storm. Her eyes filled with tears, but a small, sad smile tugged at her lips. On the bedside table, there was a folded piece of paper with her name written shakily across it. Her hands trembled as she opened it. "Dear Clara. If you're reading this, I suppose I've finally gone home. Don't be sad, my dear. You gave an old man more kindness than he'd known in years. Every morning, your smile reminded me that I still mattered, that the world still had light in it. You think you just gave me breakfast, but you gave me something much greater, you gave me a reason to wake up. There's one thing I never told you. I have a son, James. Haven't spoken to him since his mother died. I didn't think he'd want to hear from me, so I stayed away. But because of you, I wrote to him. I told him I was sorry. He wrote back. He's coming next week. I guess I won't be here to see him, but maybe that's all right." The words finally reached him. "You helped me find peace. Keep being kind, Clara. The world needs more hearts like yours. With gratitude. Ben." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she folded the letter. She pressed it against her chest, feeling the weight of his words sink deep into her heart. That night, she went to the pier, the one he had always talked about. The rain had stopped, and the sea shimmered under the dim glow of the moon. Clara stood there for a long time, whispering a quiet goodbye to the waves. Months passed. Life moved on. Her mother's health improved, work stabilized, and though she missed Ben deeply, his memory lingered like a gentle whisper in her heart. One morning, while walking to the bus stop, Clara noticed someone new sitting on the same bench where Ben once sat, a teenage boy, shivering, clutching a torn backpack. He looked lost, hungry, and alone. For a second, she froze. The image was painfully familiar. Then she smiled softly, walked up to him, and said, "You look like you could use something warm." She handed him her coffee and the sandwich she had packed for herself. The boy looked up, startled. "Are you sure?" he asked. "Absolutely," she said. "Eat. It's a cold morning." He hesitated, then nodded gratefully. "Thank you, miss. You're really kind." As Clara turned to leave, she glanced back once more at the boy. He reminded her of a promise she hadn't realized she'd made, to keep Ben's kindness alive. From that day forward, she made it a habit. Every week, she'd carry an extra meal, sometimes for a stranger, sometimes for an elderly neighbor. And each time she gave, she felt the same warmth Ben had once given her, the quiet truth that kindness never truly ends. It ripples outward, touching lives we may never know. Years later, Clara would often sit at that same bench on quiet mornings, watching the sun rise over the sea. People would sometimes stop to talk, and she would listen, offering a smile or a word of comfort. And somewhere beyond the waves, she liked to think that old Ben was smiling too, grateful that one little act of kindness had saved not just his soul, but hers as well.